So welcome back to the IPHA Talk series, where we interview various students and professionals within the healthcare field. The purpose of this series is to start a conversation on interprofessionalism, as well as provide insight on the different career paths within healthcare. We hope this helps students make more informed decisions about their future careers. I'm Herneet.
I'm Gobika. Our guest today is Dr. John Woulfe, who is an associate scientist in the Neuroscience program at the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute, an attending staff neuropathologist at the Ottawa Hospital, and an assistant professor at the University of Ottawa. Welcome, Dr. Woulfe. It is so great to have you join us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Of course. So I think we can jump into the first question, which is pretty basic. We just want to ask if you could walk us through what a neuropathologist does and kind of give more insight into this career path.
Okay. Well, neuropathology in Canada is its own specialty. It's its own specialty after medical school. You go straight into neuropathology. The daily business of neuropathology, it's a diagnostic discipline in medicine. So like radiology, except as neuropathologists, we're looking at the actual tissue.
So what made you want to pursue this career path, and what was your journey like?
Wow. So I actually had a very long journey. So I after my undergraduate, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I knew I was interested in neuroscience, so I did a master's in neuroanatomy. And after that, I went on to pursue a PhD in neuroscience. And during my PhD, I applied to medical school, and I got into medical school. And I always thought that I wanted to do neurosurgery. And it wasn't until we were applying for residency positions that a friend of mine in medical school came up to me and said, "Hey, look at this." And he had the residency book that listed all the different programs. And he said, "It's neuropathology, and I think that would be perfect for you." At the time, I was convinced that I wanted to do neurosurgery, and I had done a lot of neurosurgery electives and studied neurosurgery and interacted with a lot of neurosurgeons. But when I went for my neuropathology interviews, I knew right away, talking to the people, that was for me, and that's what I wanted to do. So I started a neuropathology residency at the University of Western Ontario, and I've never looked back. It's been a wonderful, wonderful career. I absolutely love it, and I haven't worked a day in my life since.
I know that some of your research has centered around the role of alpha-synuclein aggregation in the pathophysiology of Parkinson's disease. Could you maybe talk more in depth about this kind of research?
Yeah, it's kind of a side branch of my interest in proteins and how they aggregate in neurodegenerative disease. I'm particularly interested in proteins that aggregate inside the nucleus of brain cells and what they do to the nucleus when they do that. Synuclein is one protein. As you know, it's a protein that aggregates in Parkinson's disease. So we actually found that synuclein, it's been known actually for some time that synuclein doesn't just aggregate in neurons in the brain, but it aggregates in neurons in other organs of the body as well. In fact, the aggregation of synuclein is thought to start not in the brain in Parkinson's disease, but decades earlier in other organs, specifically in the nervous system that supplies the gut, so the intestines. We actually showed that alpha-synuclein is present in the appendix, the appendix that you get taken out when you have appendicitis. And that was interesting to me because the appendix has lots of inflammatory cells in it. And it's thought that the interaction between the immune system, or inflammatory cells, and alpha-synuclein might have something to do with initiating the aggregation of alpha-synuclein. And then once alpha-synuclein starts to aggregate, it spreads along the nervous system and ultimately reaches the brain, but this takes years and years. So this is something called the Bragg hypothesis that suggests that alpha-synuclein aggregation starts outside of the brain and then over years and years reaches the brain to cause Parkinson's disease.
Mm-hmm. We do know that you've been researching at the Ottawa Hospital Research Institute. How long have you been researching there?
Oh my gosh. So I was actually recruited there by Dr. Michel Chrétien, who was the head of the Diseases of Aging unit here in it's now 20 years ago. So I've been working at the OHRI for 20 years. Wow, that's a long time, isn't it?
Yeah.
I must be old.
No. On the note of collaborating, going off of what you're talking about at the OHRI, we were doing some research about what kind of work you do there and all of that. And we saw that you've collaborated with Dr. Doug Gray, which is very interesting for us because we also interviewed him for this series as well. And we're just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what research you did together and how you collaborated.
So Doug is a brilliant guy. The way I got to know Doug is very interesting. I was reading a paper in one of our neuropathology journals, and I thought, man, this guy has it figured out. And the paper was about his research interest, which is ubiquitin and how proteins get degraded in the brain. And I thought, wow, this guy really has a good hypothesis about what's going on with ubiquitin and these inclusions. And only after I read the paper did I look at where he was from, and I noticed he was from Ottawa, and I was in Ottawa at the time. So I immediately emailed him, and we got together and discussed how we could collaborate, and we've never looked back. So our collaboration is great.
So as we did more of a bit of a research on you, we found that yourself and your colleagues identified a new kind of brain tumor that was removed during a patient's treatment. Could you speak more on this discovery and its implications in the scientific community?
Yeah, so this was a kind of serendipitous thing where, I got a case. I spoke to you earlier about, what I do day to day, and a lot of that is looking under the microscope. It's kind of nice when you get an easy case and you can sign it out quickly. This case was not like that. So it was a young person who had a brain tumor that was growing quickly. And when I looked under the microscope, it didn't match any of the brain tumors that I'm used to seeing. And I showed it to colleagues, and they didn't know what it was either. We have certain techniques where we can narrow down the diagnosis, and that wasn't narrowing it down. So I sent it off for what we call molecular testing. So molecular genetics is playing an increasingly important role in brain tumor diagnostics these days. So I sent this off for genetic testing, and it didn't match any of the entities in their kind of cohort of brain tumors either. So we did some molecular sequencing of it, and we found a novel kind of genetic mutation called a fusion between two genes that hadn't been described as being fused before in any other type of cancer. So this was a new form of brain cancer, a new tumor. And the reason for publishing it is not to get our name in lights or anything. It's to encourage other researchers and other pathologists more so, to if they see a similar histological appearance under the microscope, to do the genetic testing and see if we can get more cases. And the reason we need more cases is we need to find out how this tumor behaves clinically and how the patients will do and respond to certain treatments. We can't do that until we have enough cases to look at.
More so regarding how I read about you being an assistant professor as well. I was wondering if you could just talk about maybe what types of classes you teach or what department you were in, just that sort of stuff.
Sure. Well, for classes, for undergrad, I teach medical students in neuroblock. So I give a lecture in dementia, and I give a lecture in stroke, and one in brain tumors. And that about covers it for medical school. I also teach at the postgraduate level. Doug Gray and I share one master's student at the present time. And I share a postdoc with a professor in engineering, Fabio Variola. We share a postdoc together. And in the Faculty of Graduate Studies, I'm involved in a number of thesis advisory committees and thesis examination committees and things like that.
As a professor, would you say that students learn better through the hands-on teaching that you do? Or would you say it's the lectures that are more engrossing and they learn more there? Do you think there's one that's a bit better, so to speak, than the other?
Well, they sleep a lot less with the hands-on training, I'll tell you that much. But I think it's a combination of both. I mean, I think you need to learn medicine, to learn any specialty. You need both. So I need to teach both.
You were mentioning kind of briefly about lab students and members, and we just want to know your opinion on, when seeking out lab members, what qualities that you look for in students.
Yeah, I feel very strongly about this, and the number one quality, and it's head and shoulders above number two. In fact, I'm not even sure what number two is, but number one is definitely a genuine curiosity. I think if a student has that, any trainee has that, it goes for miles and miles in terms of what they'll be able to produce. It is a self-starter. Having that curiosity, I think, is the number one, number two, and number three characteristic that I look for in a trainee.
So we know that you are a neuropathologist and an associate professor, but how do you balance your research doing and being a professor at the same time?
Yeah, that's a good question too. And I'm fortunate here in Ottawa to work with a very good colleague, a very valued colleague. Gerard Jansen is the other neuropathologist here, and we share the clinical service. So he's on service for a week, and so we each take a week at a time on service here, covering the operating room and covering the slides that come in and the autopsies, and then we spend a week on research. So we're able to divide our time quite nicely that way. And I have a lot of gratitude to our department, who allows us to do that as well.
Moving on to the next question, we wanted to hear from you what you feel some of the highlights of your career thus far have been as a neuropathologist and in doing everything that you do.
I can't think of anything, in terms of specific achievements in terms of awards and things. We had a paper in 2013 that was selected as the best article in the journal called Movement Disorders. It was the best scientific article of the year. That, those kind of achievements. We just published a book chapter along with Doug Gray, actually. That's another achievement. But I think the real achievement is the kind of satisfaction that you get from working with your colleagues and from having little successes every day. I mean, in terms of interesting cases that you were able to solve and things like that. Those are the real achievements, the ones that I value, the little kind of daily achievements that you get to share with your colleagues. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds corny, but there you go.
No, I think it's very true. Again, it just goes back to, if you really love what you do and you're able to do it on a daily basis like yourself, then you would find joy in those things over others. So it makes sense. Yeah, for sure. I think that's something everyone should do. They should always work on improving themselves, and I guess looking at those areas where they think they can be better and working on them actively. I think that's a really good point. That does sum up all of our questions. Would you like to add anything else?
No, but I would like to know, so where are you guys at in your training?
So for me, we're both in undergraduate studies. We're both in second year. I'm doing my bachelor's in honors of health sciences, and I'm looking later on to hopefully attend medical school and follow a path similar to yours. I hope so. But that's where I'm at right now.
Great.
I'm also a second year. I'm pursuing psychology. I'm trying to go into master's either in speech pathology or genetic counseling.
Oh, fantastic. Well, it's really nice talking to both of you.
Of course, of course. I think we can do the closing remarks now. So Dr. Woulfe, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today. It's been really insightful, and we have definitely learned a lot from you, and hopefully everyone tuning in has as well. So thank you to everyone tuning in to another episode of IPHA Talks. We hope you enjoyed this episode as much as we did. And as always, you can find us at Ottawa IPHA on our social platforms. And we will be posting this interview on all of these platforms for you to check out. So have a great week. Thank you again, Dr. Woulfe, for joining us. It's been really great.
Thank you
My
so much.
pleasure.